Hi everybody and welcome to On the Block. I'm Ed Wilkinson. Today we're going to be speaking with Father Gabriel Gillen, and he's a Dominican priest who grew up here in the Rockaways. Father Gillen, nice to see you.
It's great to be here, Ed. Thanks for having me.
Now, some of our viewers might recognize you because you've appeared on Net TV in our vocational promo film. It's called The Chosen, and you were the guy on the surfer board, weren't you?
Yeah, my friends always tease me about surfing. They say, you know, you can't walk on water, you need to use a board, so I get a lot of jokes. But yeah, that was great being part of that.
Yeah. Where did they film all that stuff? It
was all over the place. My mom's got a house down in Florida in Vero Beach, so I had a little GoPro camera, so some of the footage is from there. But with another priest buddy of mine, I like to go on vacation once a year, and we usually pick a place where he can fish and I can surf, so I got footage from all over.
How did you get started surfing?
I always wanted to surf, grew up in Rockaway Beach. My dad didn't want me to have a surfboard. You know, I was worried about it in grammar school, 5th grade. I wanted to have my own board. Finally, I bartered. I got the bum end of the deal, a nice bike for a horrible surfboard. My dad thought that was funny, so my next birthday, he got me a nice surfboard.
Yeah. I know some people do surf down in the Rockaways, but it's not known as a surfing mecca, is it?
It's not known that way, but it gets some really big waves sometimes, especially off season in the winter time. And I started to get into winter surfing a number of years ago, but yeah, no, you can get some big waves, but it can be flat for, you know, it's months, you know, so it's hit or miss.
Where do you like to go? Where do you get the big waves around here?
You know, the further out east you go, the better the waves are. If you go all the way out to Montauk or even down further in New Jersey, you get some good waves. It's more exposed to the ocean in the south and out and in Montauk.
Yeah. So do you feel it keeps you in shape?
I get tired, I get wiped up, especially the hardest thing is winter surfing when you put the wetsuit on. It's just exhausting, just paddling around in it, and it's a workout. So I was a hospital chaplain at Sloan Kettering in New York, and the pastor told me on my day off he just wants me out of the city, so that's when I got into the winter surfing as well.
So you grew up in Rockaway, Breezy Point, I think, originally,
Breezy
right?
Point, born in Breezy Point, and then when I was still very young, our family moved up to Bell Harbor, 141st Street, so St. Francis de Sales Parish there.
Yeah, and you went to St. Francis de Sales School?
Went there to grammar school and off to McClancy for high school in Elmhurst.
What was St. Francis de Sales School like? Did you have sisters? Did you have lay teachers?
Yeah, there were a couple sisters there, and Sister Eileen was there for many years. She taught it. She was principal, or she was involved with the Cathedral Prep in Queens as well. But yeah, we had some sisters.
And did people talk to you about being a priest when you were young? Did they say, that guy's going to be a priest?
No, nobody did. And, you know, I didn't really, during that time, I'm 51 now, and during that time, I didn't really see anybody studying for the priesthood. As a kid, I did feel a calling in early grammar school, but as you get older, you don't think about it. And in high school and college, I, you know, kind of drifted from the faith throughout college and worked on Wall Street for about 4 years. Didn't really practice the faith during that time.
Oh. How about, so then you went to McClancy? That's a bit of a trip, going from Breezy Point to
McClancy.
No,
it was a long ride on the Q53 bus. I felt bad for all the commuters having to put up with all the high school students being loud. But and then did track and field, did high jump, and then went off to Stony Brook after that for college.
McClancy was a very good school when it comes to some sports there. And
track and good field. Basketball, good track and field.
Wasn't there a brother who was a big coach, moderator out there?
They had a couple different brothers that were pretty good at a few different sports, So.
Did the brothers ever try to pull you into there?
No, I went on a retreat once, but it didn't really,
click?
Did not click at all, no. High school, definitely not, and college, definitely not. In fact, once I went off to college, only if I was home, my parents would, you know, drag me to mass, and but I wouldn't go on my own in college.
So you went away to Stony Brook?
Went away to Stony Brook, and you know, it was a good experience. Huge school, and it's really grown now. And yeah, it was a good experience.
What did you study? What did you major in? What did you think you were going to become?
Yeah, I wasn't quite sure what I was going to do. I had a minor in business management, and then when I was graduating college, a buddy of mine was working in finance, and I ended up working for Dean Witter. I applied to a job, and I started off as a stockbroker, got trained at the World Trade Center, in '89, and then did that for about 4 years.
So you say you drifted from the faith during college years. You weren't active in the Newman Apostolate or anything like that out there?
No, and in fact, I'm on this board of the Focus Catholic Missionaries, and they're starting a chapter at Stony Brook. I'm like, oh, I'm gonna have to go out there, do so, make up for some lost time.
They might remember you,
Yeah, well, yeah. So so that should be good going back there to Stony Brook to check it out with the new Catholic Center being revived there. So looking forward to that. But no, I started searching a little bit. I had a sister who she was in the 82nd Airborne, used to run marathons, jump out of airplanes. She had an offer to teach at West Point, and she declined it because she wanted to get more involved with her faith. And when she came back and told us that, we were a little shocked about that. I gave her, ironically, the hardest time about it, questioning it. And she wanted to go to Franciscan University of Steubenville and get a master's degree and serve the church teaching or doing something. But she ended up getting a form of leukemia, aplastic anemia, and our family was always very close, but she was treated at Sloan Kettering, and she ended up in a very short period of time getting very sick and dying there. And that started a process, but I wasn't looking in my own backyard. I was kind of looking at different forms of Eastern meditation and searching, but not too actively. And I was at a Barnes & Noble on the Upper East Side, and I happened to come across a book on Marian apparitions, Fatima, Lourdes, some other places, and it piqued my curiosity, and I began searching in my own backyard, asking some friends about it who I knew more about the faith than I did.
Yeah. But you said you started out with a Wall Street career working over there.
I did,
and, how many years did you do that?
About 4 years. It's really hard work, especially in the beginning. You work really hard, but I started to do well. That was part of my process of looking at my faith. When I was home one weekend, the pastor at St. Francis de Sales gave a great homily, basically on St. Augustine, our hearts are restless till they rest in you. And he gave some really good examples of George Eastman Kodak and others who basically fulfilled the American dream, but the hearts were left empty. And he started talking about our hearts are made for more. And in any event, that stayed with me because I was seeing it lived out. These guys, I was in my early 20s, these guys were in their early to mid 30s. They were knocking the ball out of the park, making a ton of money, and I was doubling my income every year, and I was on track to be, as good as they were in the business, but they weren't happy, so they were shattering my image. I was like, oh man, these guys aren't happy.
Yeah.
So that began kind of, searching a little bit, but I wasn't too active.
You see films, you read books about, Wall Street, and they're very competitive, and there's a lot of socializing, a lot of drinking. Sometimes, people are turning to drugs. Did you see some of that competitiveness there?
Yeah, you work hard, you play hard. Thankfully, my best friend since grammar school is one of my roommates. After we came back from college, we both were in it. So we would drink beer, and we saw some guys get caught up in some heavier stuff, and that wasn't bad. Some guys really take their faith seriously as they get older and it's more integrated. But in general, what got me was if you place your priority on the success and the competitiveness and being, being at the top, you're never going to be fulfilled. You got to, put first things first. And when you put the faith first, everything begins to unfold.
You mentioned that you were home for a weekend and you went to Mass and you heard this sermon by the pastor, homily. So were you drifting back and forth in and out of the church?
No, my mom just, if you were
she
home,
dragged
you had to go to Mass. So
how to make it look good.
I reluctantly went, but it was a really great homily. He was, Monsignor Garrity was there. He was there for my first Mass at St. Francis Seals years later, and I reminded him of his influence during my first Mass there. Did
he remember that homily?
He kind of did. He was like, wow. He was very humbled but it was a great homily.
Yeah, no, he is a great guy, he's a smart guy, and he's really a good priest. So when we come back, we're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about now your little turn in your life there, and your decision to become a priest. So we're talking with Father Gabriel Gillen. I'm Ed Wilkinson. Stay with us. We're coming right back on the block. Welcome back to On the Block. I'm Ed Wilkinson, talking today with Father Gabriel Gillen. And so we're talking a little bit about your time at Stony Brook, and then you went on Wall Street. And What happened? I mean, was there a moment that something snapped and you said, you know, what am I doing? How did the idea of priesthood ever come up?
Yeah, so it was a big surprise to a lot of my friends, and my parents were surprised. They were never really pushing the vocation. It was funny, going back to high school, I went to McClancy, but my mom wanted me to check out Cathedral Prep because it was closer to Rockaway and it's a good school. I wouldn't even go to the open house. She's like, why won't you go to the open house? I said, they're going to brainwash me.
They want me to be a priest.
And it was a little bit of the Shakespeare, methinks thou protest too much. You know? So there was something there. But yeah, when I was working, again, I was disappointed with, you know, putting success as my main priority in life. I had lost a sister, and I thought, well, my takeaway from that was life is short, so just work hard, make your mark, but it wasn't really a big spiritual conversion for me. However, I was searching, and when I was in a Barnes & Noble on the Upper East Side in Manhattan, I had a nice apartment. This book on Marian apparitions has struck me. I said, well, if this is true, what they're saying about the Blessed Mother is true, and I didn't, quite frankly, at that point, believe in a lot of the things. You know, the church teaching on the Mother of God is pretty remarkable, miraculous, and I was like, oh, it just sounds a little over the top. But the accounts about some of these apparition sites, I was like, if this is true, then that means the Catholic Church is true. And if it is true, I just want to know what is true, you know? You know, as Dominicans, we hold that model of Veritas up. The only reason you should believe anything is because it's true.
Right.
And we have faith and reason, and they don't conflict with one another. So in any event, I had that process of beginning just to look and talk to people who've been to some of these sites. Is this for real? And the more I investigated it, the more I realized, wow, there's a convergence of evidence here that's pretty strong. I ended up taking my brother with me on a pilgrimage, and he was like my guinea pig because I didn't tell him anything about it, but we both had very powerful experiences, and we both really started to come back to the faith. Where did you go? I went to Medjugorje, but I went to Fatima and Lourdes as well. And it's, we both started coming back to the faith, and and that was that.
So what do you do at that moment? You know, you feel this and you say, oh, well, maybe. Do you go to talk to somebody?
Yeah, it was a long process of talking to a bunch of people, and then went back to the sacraments. It was like over 10 years since I went to confession, and that was a great experience. I was scared about it, and there was nothing to be scared about. I had a wonderful experience, and I felt like a piano was lifted off my shoulder. And then basically, you start talking to different people, and then after a couple of months, I realized I want to at least learn more about my faith. So I moved from New York out to Pittsburgh, my job, and I went to Franciscan University of Steubenville, which is right across the river in Ohio, and I started studying philosophy while I was still working. So, and then after a year and a half of that, I knew the more I studied, the more I felt I was being called to the priesthood. They had a great campus in Austria, went there, worked on a fishing boat in Alaska right before going into my novitiate, and then went to Africa after that. So
where did you find the Dominicans? I mean,
everywhere I studied, at Steubenville, in Africa, and then in Italy for 6 years, I always had Dominican professors and spiritual directors, and I always joke after about 6 years they brainwashed me and I became a Dominican.
Well, it sounds like, I mean, like you say, Veritas, truth is really the slogan of the Dominicans, and that's the way your mind was working at that time. So it sounds like a natural alignment.
Really a natural alignment. Again, I was kind of fighting that vocation too. I thought the Dominicans were too, I wanted a smaller group that kind of moved a little faster. Dominicans tend to, take their time, but when they move rock and stone. So I initially, same thing. Yeah, I think I was called to the Dominicans right from the beginning, but it took me a couple of years of being a missionary and traveling around the world to kind of realize I was actually being called right back to my home area.
So did you have to go then and study in a seminary like everybody else?
Yeah, yeah. I did my philosophy out in Steubenville at Franciscan University. I studied in Africa for 1 year, theology, and then did some degrees in Rome at the Angelicum, where a lot of guys, some guys from the North American College study there or at the Greg.
Yeah. Now, is that a tough adjustment for you to make? I mean, you're out, you're making money, you're living a nice life on Wall Street.
The biggest one was going from New York to Ohio, because it's a little steel town.
Yes.
There were gunshots at night. I went from a very nice apartment to a dump, and I had questions in the middle of the night, like, what have I done? You know? But at the same time, I was enjoying what I was studying. I really enjoyed the people there. Not everybody went off to the priesthood, but they were serving the church in one way or another. A lot of really dedicated lay people, and so at the same time, it was great. But yeah, it was a huge. Yeah. Even the terminology. All the lingo that we have, it's kind of like the military. The church has its own lingo. I was like, I couldn't understand 80% of
yes,
some of the language they were using.
Yeah. How about your experience in Rome? Did that give you like a wider view of what the church is?
It really was. I mean, Africa was huge, and then Rome, same thing. The history, it just blows you away. It's on every corner, and it was a really special time. I was ordained by Cardinal Foley, originally from Philadelphia.
Oh, really? Wow.
And great guy. And,
yes.
It was a great honor, and I love coming back to Rome from time to time.
Yeah. So you were ordained in Rome?
I was ordained in Subiaco, actually. The missionary order that I was with had a little house. That's where St. Benedict started. He lived in a cave there for 3 years, and I was up in the mountains there for 3 years, right near the monastery, and we commuted into Rome.
So when you were ordained, was there a class or was there a group of people that were ordained?
Yeah, there's a group of guys from the missionary order that I was with, and and we were, we picked a church right out there in Subiaco in Italy.
What do you remember most about Ordination Day, the ceremony itself? Were there moments that stand out?
Well, the night before, couldn't sleep with some of the other guys, and we stayed up. We were just in the chapel, and we weren't trying to be pious. We were nervous, and it just. And we were just clinging to God, and it's a little overwhelming. And then there's just a lot of graces. It's, I've been a priest now 18 years this June, and it goes by so quickly. It's never been boring, and you meet so many amazing people, and it's just been great.
Yeah. Okay, we're going to talk a little bit more now about your ministry and some of the things you do as a Dominican. We're going to take a quick break. We're talking to Father Gabe Gillen. We're going to be right back. Welcome back to On the Block. I'm Ed. This is Father Gabriel. We're talking about your life as a Dominican. We just got up to your ordination day, and now the Dominicans are known as the Order of Preachers.
That's right.
Right? So what do? You go around the world preaching to people?
Yeah. You go where you're sent. So my first assignment was Sloan Kettering, which I didn't tell anybody. I had a sister. For me, that was like ground zero. I didn't really want to, it was a very rough area. And it's the last place I would ask to be assigned.
That was your first assignment?
First assignment as a Dominican.
Wow.
So I almost called the provincial and said, that's a little too much, but it was ridiculously providential. So I was like, all right, let me just try it. And I had a great experience there for 2 years. I didn't know how long the assignment would be, and it was rough. Those 2 years felt like 10, but some amazing experiences. So I really enjoyed that, and then I was asked to be a college chaplain at NYU and working with the college students. I did that. I worked with the film students as well. We still produce some documentaries, and which you guys have shown. Yeah. And then I was then asked to serve in our headquarters, is right in New York at St. Vincent Ferrer. You guys did a nice piece on that about the church. And so I'm assigned there at St. Vincent Ferrer, working on our headquarters.
And what's your duties though right now?
Yeah. Well, the good news is we have a record number of vocations. The bad news is I got to do the fundraising for it. So when I first took over, somebody joked with me, like, so how do you sleep at night? You got to raise all this money. You don't have a big base of support. I said, I sleep like a baby. I wake up every 2 hours. I cry my eyes out. But we built up, we have the Shrine of St. Jude, and we were able to build it up. We have over 100,000 people now actively involved with the shrine, and the proceeds of the shrine go to support the seminarians.
Where's the shrine?
It's down in Washington, D.C., right off the mall, but we do the administrative office right out of New York, and So, and I'm down there a lot as well, and and the pastor down there helps me run the shrine.
So are there pilgrimages to the shrine? Do people
There
come down?
are, and there's just a lot of people that send in our devotions. Aaron Neville, the musician, has a great story about St. Jude. I interviewed him about that, and the General West, who's the Surgeon General for the Army, she has a great story about St. Jude. So you run into people from all over the country about their devotion to St. Jude, and he certainly came through for me, because it was like an impossible cause for paying for all these guys.
Yeah, what is the attraction of St. Jude? Is it because he's tagged with that impossible thing?
What happened was, it happened in Chicago. There was a Claretian priest who, right before the 1929 market crash and the Great Depression, saw that he was rebuilding his church, and his parishioners, 90% of them were laid off in steel mills as the Great Depression was hitting the United States. He had a devotion to St. Jude, and he just said, "St. Jude, please take care of my parishioners, and if you do so, I'll build a shrine." And a lot of them were able to get work, and that story spread throughout the country, and then a lot of places started. It was more of an American phenomenon. I mean, there's always a devotion to St. Jude, especially in Italy. There was a shrine as well, the relics being brought over from other places in Europe to Italy. And so the Dominicans in the United States asked one of the Dominicans in Italy if they could, bring some of the relics over. And the devotion became more of an American devotion, although it's spreading. It's big in Mexico, and it's spread. But it was more associated with the Great Depression and how people really resonated. He was kind of a lost apostle, and so he became an apostle of lost causes.
So you're raising money through the shrine to support the seminary and studies, and you said you've got an influx of vocations.
Yeah, we have.
Why is that?
Yeah, all guys from the United States.
Yeah.
We put a lot. It was counterintuitive, but we put a lot of our friars into our formation house in D.C., which was counterintuitive at the time. It was like be a lot less expensive if we just sent them across the street to Catholic University of America. But we figured, friars usually want to be trained by other friars in the thought of St. Thomas Aquinas, and some of our guys are really good at that. So we built a really good formation program, and it's just started a steamroll.
So what's different about studying to be a Dominican and studying, say, to be a diocesan priest? How is the formation different?
Yeah, the formation is the same in a general structure. Everybody's required to do 2 years of philosophy, 4 years of theology. We tend to concentrate a lot in our theology and our philosophy on the thought of St. Thomas Aquinas. So there's a slight difference with that. The Carmelites wouldn't do that. The Franciscans would do Bonaventure. They would, Don Scotus, they would look at others. So, not to say that people don't study St. Thomas Aquinas, but we do an emphasis on that. And he's big on faith and reason. And today there's such a divorce between faith and science and other things. We think there's a call for that. The other thing is, a lot of our guys, before they join us, kind of read their way in, like reading Dr. Peter Craiff and others, and they talk about St. Thomas Aquinas a lot, and he emphasizes reason, and you don't believe it just because somebody told you. You believe it because it's reasonable, and it doesn't go against faith.
Yeah. One of the things that's interesting is this debate between faith and science, and one of the things is that we're learning more and more about is that science does not contradict faith.
That's right. In fact, we have a couple of guys joining us who there were scientists before they joined us. One guy has his PhD in physics from Stanford, another guy from MIT in molecular biology, and they continue to teach at colleges and talk at conferences about how just what you're saying, Ed, that there's not a divide there. And a lot of scientists who are secular scientists, a fair amount do have faith. It's more of a media impression that every scientist is an atheist. That's not true.
Yeah. You think scientists can support the faith, encourage people to be people of faith?
Sure, because the study of the natural world and how things work is how we discover about God. We learn through science about how things are created.
What's the future for vocations? I mean, we hear a lot about that people are still being called to priesthood and religious life, not as many as responding, although you seem to be doing fairly well. Do you see a future for religious life here in the United States?
I do. In the Northeast, it's rough. The South and the West are growing. Villanova did some studies on the demographics, but it's going to be rough in the Northeast. But at the same time, there's a lot of strong pockets that are strong and going to keep growing. And so yes, there'll be a reduction in certain places. Brooklyn and Queens is going through that as well. We had a lot of churches all over the place. You're going to see some consolidation, but at the same time, I think you're going to see some very strong pockets.
Yeah. As a Dominican, and you go out and you want to encourage vocations, but do you encourage people specifically to be a Dominican?
We and other religious orders do the same thing. You can kind of tell, like, if somebody has a Benedictine or Franciscan or Dominican style. So everybody, you don't want somebody who's like called to be a Franciscan to be with you. It's not a numbers count. I don't get an extra Bible for every vocation that comes in, and you want them to be the most fruitful and the best fit. So diocesan priests as well sometimes recommend people to us, or we might say, you're kind of geared to be a diocesan or a Franciscan, and they do the same thing. Wow. And you get a sense of the different formation houses and what somebody's called to.
Yeah. Fascinating story. Nice to talk to you today about religious
Thanks,
life.
Ed.
I want to thank Father Gabe Gillen for being with us today. Thank you for being with us, and I hope you'll join us again the next time here on The Block.